Hi, sixth graders. I am sorry that I couldn't be here today, but we will be doing an ed puzzle to go through our learning for lesson 8. Lesson 8 is going to be a bonus lesson, and it covers the topic of government.
Lesson 8. Government. A government is a group of people who have the power to make and enforce laws for a country or area. The basic purposes of government are to keep order, to provide services, and to protect the common good, or the well-being of the people. Protecting the common good can include building roads and schools, or defending the country from attack. Governments make and enforce laws to keep order. Governments also collect taxes from people and businesses. Governments use these taxes to pay for the goods and services they provide. Introduction to Government. The purposes of government have not changed much over time. The functions and structures of government have changed over time, however. Origins of government. Long before modern governments existed, people lived together in groups. These groups often had leaders who kept order and made decisions for the group. This arrangement was a simple form of government. More complex governments first appeared in Southwest Asia more than 5,000 years ago. By that time, groups of people had settled down to farm land. Villages had grown into cities. People found that they needed an organized way to resolve problems and oversee tasks, such as repairing irrigation canals and distributing food. They formed governments to manage those tasks. Different types of government developed over time. In ancient Greece, for example, states centered on cities developed. In Athens, Greece, they progressed from rule by kings to a form of direct rule by the people. Later, the Romans created the Republic, in which the people chose representatives to govern them. Like the Romans, the people who created the U.S. government made it a republic. Powers of government. Today, most governments are based on a constitution. A constitution is a set of basic rules and principles for organizing and running a government. A constitution also identifies the powers of a government. Those powers are either limited or unlimited. Limited government means that government actions are limited or restricted by law. Limited governments work to protect the common good and provide for people's needs. In 1689, the King and Queen of England accepted limits to their power in the English Bill of Rights. It listed several rights that all England's people had and the government could not take away. In the United States, government actions are limited by the U.S. Constitution in order to protect people's individual freedoms. Many of these freedoms are spelled out in the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. These amendments are called the Bill of Rights. Generally, people in a limited government may gather freely, express their opinions, and work to change government policies. Unlimited government means that there are no effective limits on government actions. In an unlimited government, such as China's, a ruler or a small ruling group has the power to make all decisions for a country or society. Unlimited power can lead to tyranny or the unjust use of power. Unlimited governments often do not protect citizens' basic rights. For example, they may censor or restrict citizens' access to the internet and their ability to write or speak freely. Forms of government. Governments can control different kinds of areas. A state is a region that shares a common government. The first real states, called city-states, Developed in Southwest Asia more than 5,000 years ago. A city-state is an independent state consisting of a city and the territory it controls. Later, some military leaders conquered large areas and ruled them as empires, which are states containing several countries. Today, the world is divided into nation-states. These are states that are independent of other states. All nation-states have some common features. They have a specific territory with clearly defined borders. They have governments, laws, and authority over citizens. Each nation-state has a government, but there are many different kinds of government. Each one has its own systems and functions. Throughout history, most nation-states were one of two types: autocracies or oligarchies. Autocracies are ruled by one person, typically a king or queen in the past. Oligarchies are governments in the hands of a small group of people. Today, however, many nation-states have some form of democracy in which citizens hold political power. Democracy. Democracy is a form of government in which citizens hold political power. Citizens are the ultimate source of government power and authority in a democracy. In a direct democracy, citizens come together to pass laws and select leaders. In a representative democracy, citizens elect representatives to make government decisions. The powers of a democratic government are usually limited. The United States is an example of a representative democracy. Authoritarian government. An authoritarian government is one in which all power is held by a single person or a small group. Autocracies and oligarchies in the past were often authoritarian. Government may control all aspects of life. Another form of authoritarian government is communism, a political and economic system in which government owns all property and makes all economic decisions. Cuba and North Korea have communist systems. The powers of an authoritarian government are unlimited. Authoritarian governments that are not led by a royal family are called dictatorships. Monarchy. A monarchy is a form of government in which the state is headed by a monarch. A monarch is typically a king or queen. The position is inherited by family members. Monarchies may be authoritarian or democratic. The powers of a monarchy can be limited or unlimited. Absolute monarchs rule with unlimited power over authoritarian governments. Monarchs in constitutional monarchies have powers that are limited by a constitution. Constitutional monarchies are often democracies. Saudi Arabia is an example of an authoritarian absolute monarchy. The United Kingdom is an example of a constitutional monarchy. It is also a democracy in which the monarch has very little power.
Here is an interactive map that goes over the constitutional-based federal republic like the United States, the constitutional monarchy like the United Kingdom, the theocracy like Iran, the communist state of China, and the communist state one-man dictatorship of North Korea.
Government structures. Countries distribute power between the central government and governments of smaller areas. We can learn more about a government by examining its structure and principles. Systems of government. Governments can distribute power in three basic ways: the unitary system, the federal system, and the confederal system. In a unitary system, a central government makes all laws for the entire country. In a federal system, power is divided among central, regional, and local governments. Central governments are responsible for national affairs. Regional governments include state or provincial governments. Local governments include county, city, and town governments. In a confederal system, a group of independent states join together and give limited powers to a common government. Most countries have a unitary system. The United States and some other countries have a federal system. The confederal system, also called a confederation, is rare. Branches of government. Under the U.S. Constitution, power is divided among three branches of government: the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. This division is called separation of powers. The Constitution also establishes a system of checks and balances that limits each branch's power. Each branch has some power to check or limit the actions of the other branches. Other countries may organize their branches in different ways. For example, the head of the U.S. executive branch is the president. In many countries with a parliament, the head of the executive branch is the prime minister. In this system, citizens do not choose the prime minister directly. Instead, the political party that has the most seats in the parliament chooses its leader as the prime minister. Principles of government. Every government has basic principles that affect the way it serves its people. You can evaluate different government systems and functions by how well they work for the common good. Authoritarian governments may seek to control all aspects of society, even people's actions and beliefs. They often disregard individual rights. Most democratic governments act to protect individual rights and the common good. In the United States, government follows basic democratic principles. For example, government follows the rule of law. That is, government powers are defined by laws that limit its actions. Also, government decides issues by majority rule. A law cannot pass unless the majority, most, of the representatives vote for it. At the same time, the majority may not take away the basic rights and freedoms of minority groups or individuals. In other words, government must balance majority rule with minority rights. Conflict and cooperation. Every country has clearly defined territory and sovereignty over that territory. Sovereignty means supreme authority or power. Every country also has a central government. The central government takes care of matters that affect the whole country. This includes dealing with other countries' governments. Most countries have a set of goals for relations with other countries. Those goals are the country's foreign policy. A country's foreign policy reflects its values and interests. Interactions between governments can take the form of conflict or cooperation. Conflict and war. A country's foreign policy can lead to conflict with other countries. This conflict can come in the form of taking different sides on international issues or joining with other nations to try to block actions by another country's government. Conflict can also take the form of war or the use of military force. Wars begin for many reasons. Some wars begin as conflicts over control of land or resources. Others result from religious disagreements, political revolutions, or conflict between ethnic or religious groups. Wars can lead to widespread death and destruction. Cooperation. Many people view the world as a global community in which people should cooperate to avoid conflict and help others. This cooperation may take the form of a treaty, a formal agreement between two or more countries. Some treaties are agreements to help defend other countries. Other treaties are agreements to limit the harmful effects of war. For example, the Geneva Conventions list rules for the proper treatment of wounded soldiers, prisoners, and civilians. Countries also join together in various organizations. The United Nations, UN, is the largest international organization that works for peace. Nearly every country in the world belongs to the UN. Governments send representatives to the UN to engage in diplomacy. Diplomacy is managing relationships among countries through negotiation. Governments work with one another to improve their countries' economies through trade agreements as well. International trade can provide new goods and markets. Trade agreements involving multiple countries have become common in recent years. For example, the European Union, EU, includes many nations of Europe and provides for free trade among those nations. Governments also cooperate for reasons other than avoiding conflict. For example, governments often work with one another to improve public health and give humanitarian aid. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies provides medical aid, food, and other relief services to victims of war or natural disasters. The World Health Organization fights disease, especially among the world's poor, by providing health information, medical training, and medicine. CARE International seeks to end world poverty through development and self-help. Some global organizations cooperate to boost the economies of developing nations. The World Bank provides loans for projects aimed at promoting economic development. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, seeks to prevent and resolve financial crises by offering advice, information, and loans. Reading check. Summarize.